Good. One. No, they're up in Virginia. They went up there. They went up there to visit. It's where they came from before they came in. They went up there to visit, and I think Stu's going to preach today. It's a place where he did kind of an internship. So, huh? I don't know. Hey Pam, good morning. How's your hand doing? All right. Okay. Okay. So we're going to say a prayer for Olivia here. She's got something wrong with her toes. She's going to the doctor tomorrow. How's Rhonda doing? Really? Well, good for him. Okay. Okay. He may not be back, or we'll see. Anyway, um, and Robert this morning is he's getting some better from his pneumonia. Still pretty weak, and just we know as we get older we heal real slow, and he's definitely got a lot of stuff going on. But he did have a better week this week overall, and he is getting somewhat stronger. So be thankful for that. Haven't heard from Joy. Have you heard about Susan surgery? Okay, we haven't heard how her surgeries went. All right. Let's go ahead and have a prayer before we start. Father, we thankful this morning for a day of life and strength and health that you've given us to be here this morning. We ask that you bless all those on the roads this morning to be safe and be able to make their way here. We're thankful for this place you've given us to worship in and to serve you. Father, this morning we want to pray for our sister Olivia and her toes, what's going on with her toes. And you know all about it. Please bless her with healing and recovery. Be with Rhonda and help her as she struggles to breathe, COPD, and on her oxygen. We're thankful that we have the option of having oxygen to help us breathe. Be with Robert and help him gain strength and the rest that he needs. In Jesus' name. Oh, okay, sure, sure. Father, we continue to especially to ask about Art's losing a filling in his teeth and the pain that he's going through right now. Help, please ease that pain and help us find ways of helping him. Thankful that you love us so much. Father, sometimes we hurt and we need help. So please help me. In Jesus' name. It's okay, Art. That's a good thing. Absolute good thing. All right. We're going to continue our study in the Gospel of John. And we've been in chapter 4. We're going to do chapter 4 and a chunk of chapter 5 today. Uh, we just finished the whole discussion with Jesus and the woman at the well, and she had gone into town, and she brought out all the people from the town, and they had said, "Jesus, please stay with us and talk to us." So he stayed there for a couple of days, and this is where we're at right now in the narrative. We're going to pick it up in verse 43 of chapter 4. Now, after the 2 days, he departed from there and went to Galilee, for Jesus himself testified that a prophet has no honor in his own country. So when he came to Galilee, the Galileans received him, having seen all the things he did in Jerusalem at the feast, for they also had gone to the feast. So Jesus came again to Cana of Galilee, where he had made the water wine. And there was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. When he heard that Jesus had come out of Judea into Galilee, he went to him and implored him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. Then Jesus said to him, "Unless you people see signs and wonders, you will by no means believe." The nobleman said to him, "Sir, come down before my child dies." Jesus said to him, "Go your way, your son lives." So the man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him and went his way. And as he was going down, his servants met him and told him, saying, "Your son lives." Then he inquired of them the hour when he got better. They said to him, "Yesterday at the 7th hour the fever left him." So the father knew that it was the same hour in which Jesus said to him, "Your son lives." And he himself believed, and his whole household. This again is the second sign Jesus did when he had come out of Judea into Galilee. Okay, so as we said before, Jesus stopped in Shechem, where Jacob's well is, because it was on the way to Galilee. Remember, he was in Jerusalem. He was at the Passover. They started to go north. He stopped there at the well to get a drink, talked to the woman, ended up staying there for a couple of days. And it says, now after the 2 days he departed. So this is right in the same time. So he goes on up to Galilee. And then it says something interesting. It says, "For Jesus himself testified that a prophet has no honor in his own country." Where do you think he is with that? Why would he say something like that? A prophet has no honor in his own country. Well, we'll talk about it. Go ahead. Yeah, yeah, pretty much. If you live in the country, that's pretty much true. Yeah, that's just old joke. Yeah, yeah. We have a saying: "Familiarity breeds contempt." uh, that that could apply here as well. Um, but I mean, it's also interesting when Jesus is going up to Galilee here now. Remember, Jesus was raised in Nazareth. Nazareth is actually up on the way to Galilee. It's up pretty close to Galilee. But Jesus has been coming out of Jerusalem, where he had been performing miracles, and the Pharisees, were starting to get after him and things like that. So I think he's probably talking more about his country, the Jews, because he's going up into Gentile territory, than he is his hometown. But we do see this later in the scripture, don't we? There's a couple situations where Jesus is talking to some people. Says, "We know this guy. We know his mom and his dad and his brothers and sisters." In other words, they were from the hometown, right? So there is some of that too in some of the situations Jesus is talking about. Um, but when he came to Galilee, the Galileans received him, having seen all the things he did in Jerusalem at the feast, for they also had gone to the feast. So these were Galileans, but they were at least, I mean, if they were Jews, they could be Jews who lived in Galilee, right? Because Peter and Andrew and those guys, James and John, all lived up in Galilee. But they went down to the feast. Now, what's all this stuff about going to the feast? Why was everybody going down to Jerusalem to the feast? Commandment. When Moses gave them the law of Moses, there were 3 feasts a year, and every male was supposed to go to Jerusalem. There were exceptions. They made exceptions for situations, people who were sick and other kinds of things. But they had to go. It was God's command. They had to come and stand before the Lord, bring their sacrifices and be there, right? So one, and granted, if you were a Gentile and you said, hey, there's going to be 1 million Jews in Jerusalem and I'm selling stuff, I might go there and want to sell some stuff too, right? It's entirely possible that it wasn't religious reasons they went, but they had seen all the things he did at the feast. So they received Jesus. They said, we've seen this guy. He's doing a lot of good stuff. And they do honor him in a way that his home country was not doing. They received him, it says. So 46. So Jesus came again to Cana of Galilee, where he had made the water wine. And there was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. When they heard that Jesus had come out of Judea into Galilee, he went and implored him um, to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. Now, I I first, you wonder what's going on. Obviously, Jesus had been at Cana of Galilee. This had been several months before, right? He had made the water wine. That was a big miracle. That the news had spread, right? Because we were talking before that news spreads like crazy in the marketplace, right? Everybody talks. They didn't need telephone or internet. People knew. But Capernaum is 20 miles away from Cana. 20 miles. If you're walking, that's a long way. I mean, you can walk 20 miles in a day if you walk full day, but that's a load to do that. And so it was probably at least a day and a half's journey for this guy. He had heard that Jesus had come out of Judea and was in Galilee, and he went to him and implored him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. Now, you'll talk a little bit about this guy because how many of you ever had a sick child? Yeah. How many of you ever had a really sick child? Like at the point of death, sick child? I had. My daughter Sarah, who y'all have met. When she was 7 months old, she developed hyperreactive airways, and her lungs just was shut down at the slightest. I mean, it's like the worst kind of asthma you could imagine, like asthma that's just going to kill you. And the slightest cigarette smoke, perfume, anything, and just she'd start turning blue. And we lived with that off and on for 3 or 4 years until she finally started getting ahead of that. She spent time in intensive care. She spent lots and lots of time on IV steroids, in and out of the hospital. Uh, I think a lot about this guy when I read this story. I think about, what's this guy thinking? He takes off from home 20 miles away because he hears Jesus is in Cana. Does he know Jesus is still going to be there when he gets there? No, he doesn't know. What's he thinking as he's going out? Loves his son. Desperate, yes. Wanting his son to be healed. And so he comes and he says, implores him. He went to him and implored him. That's not just, hey, Jesus, I got a sick kid. You want to come see him? Imploring him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. Then Jesus said to him, unless you see signs and wonders, you will by no means believe. You ever wonder about that? That Jesus talking to this guy. I mean, obviously the guy's there, right? Now he's a nobleman. So he's not your average person, right? So he probably has a little authority about him, maybe a little pride about him. But Jesus doesn't say anything else about his son yet. When he starts out, he says, "Unless you people see signs and wonders, you will by no means believe." Now, Jesus already done some signs and wonders in other places. Yeah, he done it there in Cana too. This is a this is something that I recently, uh, last fall, ran into in an interesting way. If you remember the Canadian couple that were here with their little kids, they visited a little bit. Adam and Claudia Spitz. They live up in Ontario, and Adam, through his he was he has a Jewish background, but it's mostly secular Jewish, and he was definitely an atheist um, and a rationalist, as he would say. And when we were talking about, trying to understand this notion of God and inspiration and Jesus and everything, he said, look, why doesn't, if God's really real, I mean, look, all I ask is that he just levitate my chair 3 feet off the ground, turn me around, set me back down, and I'll believe. Now, he was serious. He was serious. There's a whole crowd of people. They happen to be, there's a lot of like computer science oriented people that start calling themselves rationalists instead of anything else. Uh, and at one point, he told me, well, if God really wants everyone to believe in him, then why doesn't he just levitate, the Empire State Building? Everybody would believe. There it is. And this notion of like, prove it to me, right? Make it no doubt, without any doubt. Now, rationalists in general, they got a lot of weird stuff, but basically they have a pretty good philosophy on one thing. They expect evidence. They expect evidence. Now, when you start talking to somebody like that and you start talking about faith, they start out because a lot of the leaders in that group are atheists. They start out going, well, faith doesn't have any evidence. It's just fuzzy. It's just believing fuzzy stuff. Well, of course, we know faith does have evidence. In fact, it is the evidence of things not seen. Hebrews 11:1. So it's just interesting here that Jesus says this people then were the same way. Now, the nobleman said to him, Sir, come down before my child dies. Now, he'd already been imploring him. Now he's begging him. Now he's begging him. The nobleman said to him that. Jesus said to him, Go your way, your son lives. So the man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him and went his way. And when he was going down, his servants met him and told him, saying, Your son lives. Then he inquired of him the hour which he got better, and he said to him, Yesterday at the 7th hour the fever left him. So the father knew that it was the same hour in which Jesus had said to him, Your son lives, and he himself believed, and his whole household. Now, a lot of times you just read right past this and you lose the time. This is why I was bringing up the thing about it's 20 miles away. Look, he asked him, Jesus said, Go your way, your son lives. So the man believed and went his way. And then notice he said, as he was going down, the servants met him, saying, Your son lives. So son's in Capernaum, the guy's in Cana, right? He's gone all the way from Capernaum to Cana to see Jesus. He sees Jesus. Jesus says, Your son lives, head on home. And he starts home. At some point, he meets the servants, his servants, who say, Your son lives. Now, look at the timing here. And he asked him the hour when he got better, and they said, Yesterday at the 7th hour. Probably 1 o'clock in the evening, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Yesterday at the 7th hour. So here you have 1 p.m. in Capernaum, 1 p.m. in Cana. This guy, the nobleman, starts back home. It's at least a day's walk, right? Probably it'd probably take him until noon the next day to get home at least. If he walked into the evening, he might, right? But the servants also came, and so they met somewhere in the middle. It's all about the same time. So they met somewhere in the middle. He's still got another half day's walk ahead of him when he finds out. But have you ever thought what this guy's thinking as he's walking down the road before the servants show up? It says he believed him. His faith was strong enough to say, I believe that Jesus can do this, and I'm going to just trust it and go. Think about walking for hours and hours and hours and hours with that in your mind. And then you see your servants coming, running probably. I imagine my servants would run if I had servants and they loved me and and my child, they'd be running to tell me the good news. Here come the servants, and the servants say, he's alive, he's better. Your son lives. And of course, I'm sure they're all excited about it. He's wanting to know more. Get this thing to wake up again. And they said, it's the seventh hour, the fever left him. Then he still has a half day walk before he gets to see his son. So what do you think he's doing on that half of his walk? Praising God, thanking God, right? And anxious to see his son. And so they go do this. Then he says, and he himself believed, and his whole household. If this had happened to your household, do you think maybe you'd believe something was going on? Yeah, you would. This again is the second sign Jesus did when he had come out of Judea into Galilee. So he's talking about the miracle at Cana. Jesus had done other miracles, right? So the first miracle he did was Cana of Galilee, the wedding feast, right? Turning the water to wine. Then he goes south. He does a bunch of miracles down there. The people say, and he does this. He heals the nobleman's son. How many miracles did Jesus perform? Huh? We don't know the precise number, but can you give it a size? Can you give it an order of magnitude? Enough? That's another good answer. I would say a whole bunch. There were lots and lots of people getting healed. We don't know. You know, you have these. This is interesting that it says this is the second sign Jesus did, because that implies that he did the miracle of water to wine and then he left and came back and he hadn't done any other miracles there. Before this, he healed this nobleman's son. Did he do anything? He was up there for a while. Did he do anything else? We don't know, right? We do know that the scripture says in several places they brought to him sick from all over, from all the towns and cities, and he healed them all. There were multitudes, and he healed them all. There were many, many, many hundreds, probably thousands, many thousands of healed people and their families who got to experience this during Jesus' ministry. We don't see that a lot. I know I always bring this up, but it's important. We see, a dozen, 20 some odd healings of Jesus in the Gospels. There were tens of thousands of people healed. Yeah, Art. Yeah, it was a man, and yeah, they did. His friends tore the roof off and lowered him down. They said because they couldn't get in because of the crowd. Right? Um, okay, let's continue. So let's move on to chapter 5. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there was in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is in the Hebrew called Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of sick people, blind, lame, and paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water. Then whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was made well of whatever disease he had. Now a certain man was there who had an infirmity 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there, and knew that he had already been in that condition a long time, so he said to him, do you want to be made well? The sick man answered, Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I am coming, another steps down before me. Jesus said to him, Rise, take up your bed and walk. And immediately the man was made well, took up his bed and walked. And that day was the Sabbath. And the Jews therefore said to him who was cured, It is a Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to carry your bed. He answered them and said, He who made me well said to me, Take up your bed and walk. Then they asked him, Who was the man who said to you, Take up your bed and walk? But the one who was healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn, a multitude being in that place. After Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, See, you have been made well. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you. And the man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. Okay. So what do we see here? So first of all, before we even get into the healing part, it says after this, after what just happened in Cana of Galilee, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Like I said, every obedient, observant male Jew knew it was his obligation and responsibility to go to Jerusalem for these feasts. Um, Then it says he comes to this. There's this pool called Bethesda. It's got 5 porches, a great multitude of sick people there, of all kinds of sickness, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain time to the pool and stirred up the water, and whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was made well of whatever disease he had. Then there was a man there. So before we get to the man, the particular man, we have a pretty extraordinary situation. We have an extraordinary situation. We don't read about this anywhere else in Scripture of things like this happening. But there's obviously some supernatural activity going on, and it's good. People are being healed. If you ever noticed, the Old Testament has very rare amounts of this kind of supernatural stuff, like healing. Yeah, you have obviously you have supernatural stuff. You have the creation, you have the flood, you have um, you know, the plagues of Egypt, right? You have all the things that where God was telling the people in the Israelites as they were going through the wilderness, all those miraculous things at Sinai and everywhere else. There were miracles for sure. But there wasn't a lot of healing going on. It wasn't the prophet's job to go around heal people. Were there some people who were healed? Yes. Were there some people who were raised from the dead? Yes, absolutely. But there are very few examples of this. In the New Testament, we have a lot of examples of supernatural acts, a whole bunch. You know what happens in the second and third centuries? Dries up. So this is a very special time. We don't understand it all. We can see what happened. We have evidence. We have the accounts. But this was a period of time where God decided to intervene in the lives of men directly, supernaturally, in things that were beyond normal explanation. Right. So uh, here comes this. No, he doesn't. Here comes this man. He's been there a long time. He's been sick 38 years. It's interesting that these details are here. Because there are times that Jesus said there was a blind man, right, or something. It says he was sick for 38 years, and it's an infirmity. It's a sickness. This is different than, there's times where Jesus met someone who'd been lame from birth, right, who'd never walked, and he healed him. This guy said he's been sick for 38 years. We don't know what the sickness is. He's lying there. He's obviously not able to get up and move around a lot because his problem was he said, I couldn't get into the water. Been there a long time. Have you ever had to deal with chronic illness? For a very long time. Very long time. How's that feel? Yeah, yeah. Sometimes it's not us, but we've experienced it. Maybe we've been the caregiver of someone who's suffered by chronic illness for a long time. My late wife, Sandy, had chronic illness her whole life. We were married for 25 years, and and it was awful. I mean, it was just so. How do you think? I find this guy fascinating because he's there, he's gone there, and a multitude of other people have. If there wasn't something happening there, they wouldn't have all gone there. So they're there. And Jesus asked him, do you want to be made well? Well, hold it. Who's there doesn't want to be made well? All these sick people of all kinds of sickness and infirmity are there. Why does Jesus ask him? Good Bible answer is we don't know. It doesn't say. Jesus asked him because of this. But, but, think about this for a minute. When he asked him this question, how does the man respond? Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, but while I am coming, another one steps down before me. How many times do you think this has happened for this man? They'd been there a long time. We don't know how long this situation lasted, right? He'd been there a long time. Have you ever been in such? I know some people have. Uh, I know with chronic illness, especially in our modern day of medicine, some new treatment or some new drug comes out, and it's got a lot of promise, and you get your hopes all built up, and you try, and maybe it even works for a little while, and then it stops working. Right? How do you think it would be for this guy, for who knows how long, has been here, and not being able to make it to the water? You know what can happen to people in these situations? Can they give up? Yeah. Can they not give up, but can they just settle in to their situation? Well, that's just kind of the way it is. I'm just never going to get there. Yeah, that can happen too. Yeah, brother. Mm. Mm-hmm. Hmm. That's interesting that, yeah, because he said, I have no one when the waters started to go in. You think everybody there was focused on their own getting there first? Hmm. Good point. Good point. Yeah. Uh huh. Hmm. Hmm. So, yeah, so God is always saying, do you need help? The interesting thing here is this guy, when Jesus says, do you want to be made well? Who did we just talk about? We talked about the nobleman, right, with his son, who came begging Jesus, please heal my son. He's about to die. And Jesus says, man, if y'all don't see miracles, you're just not going to believe. And he says, come down there, my child die, right? You think if Jesus had asked that guy the question, do you want him to be made well? What would he have responded, just from what we know about the guy? Yes, absolutely. Ah, yes, please. I find it interesting. Jesus asked the guy, do you want to be made well? This is like, man, this is sounding like a dumb question. He's there. He's obviously, well, that's what you think, right? But then how does he answer? He doesn't say, yes, Lord, please, Lord. Do you remember the blind men? When Jesus walked down the road, they're blind men. And they call out, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on us, have mercy on us. They come to him and he says, what do you want? Sir, that we might receive our sight. They're ready. They're asking, right? This guy, he doesn't know Jesus from anything, right? He doesn't know him after he's healed. He said he doesn't even know who this person was when they asked him. But he says, do you want to be made well? Look at his response. I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. Someone always gets down before me. He's talking about a very tactical, physical thing, right? He didn't say, yes, Lord, I want to be made well, but you know what? I just don't know how I'm ever going to get there. He starts out with, man, I just can't ever get there. I don't have any help. It's interesting. We can read too much into these things, but sometimes I think we do ourselves and the text a disservice if we don't try to get in these people's heads a little bit. And that means we have to kind of, think about it. But anyway, so here he is. I always wonder what kind of despair is in this man's voice when he says this. He's been there a long time. He's been sick and suffering for a long time. He's seen hope. He's apparently, seen people being healed. He wants it, but he just can't get there. You just see the despair in his voice. So Jesus says to him, rise up, take your bed and walk. And immediately, I notice the man doesn't say anything right at this point. He just immediately gets up. He's immediately made well. By the way, that's how Jesus heals people. It's not like come back next month. It's immediate. Takes up his bed and He walks. And it was the Sabbath day. And there's Jews in there. I imagine they're probably Pharisees because they tend to be real sticklers on this stuff. And it's not bad to be sticklers for God's law. But they said, hold it. It's the Sabbath. It's not lawful for you to carry your bed. You're breaking the law here. You're doing work. Now, the not all Jews took this perspective, but the Pharisees got really prickly about all the they tried to draw every little fine line about when you're doing something wrong and when you're not. That started out as a good idea, a desire to follow God closely. That's good. But they went so far with it that they're ignoring the fact that this guy's carrying his bed out of the middle of this thing. And in fact, we find out later, they ignore the fact that Jesus healed the guy. They want to kill him. So they say, it's not lawful for you to carry your bed. And he said, well, the guy who made me well said, take up my bed and walk. This is sort of like the blind man. Remember the blind man that Jesus healed? And they said, we know this man's a sinner. And he said, well, whether he's a sinner or not, I don't know. But what I do know, I was blind and now I see. Right? Very simple, straightforward evidence. Then they asked him, who was the man who said to you, take up your bed and walk? Now they're looking for the guilty party. But the one who was healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn, a multitude being in that place. Again, very clearly, there's a big crowd there, lots of sick people. And they didn't know who Jesus was, or at least they didn't recognize him. You know, they in these days, people, you know, they wore out these outer robes all the time, right? They had their kind of little tunic that they wore, but they wore an outer robe, especially when they traveled. That's what they slept in. That's what kept them warm. That's what they wrapped up in at night. Sometimes they might have that over their head. You know, but Jesus is walking around in the middle of, you know, this is right outside of Jerusalem. Jesus was there doing miracles just a little while before, and yet they're not recognizing him. So, however it was, Jesus wasn't recognized by these people. So then afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, see, you've been made well. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you. Now, why would he say that to this man that he's healed? Did he say that to other people he healed? Something like that? I don't think so. So what happened between the time the guy was healed and the time Jesus meets him in the temple? Answer is, we don't know. But Jesus, in his infinite wisdom, decided that this man needed to be sin no more, lest a worse thing come on you. What's worse than being sick and invalid for 38 years? Well, yeah, it could be another physical illness, right? But Jesus, remember, in the Gospel of John, Jesus is always pointing at the spiritual. Obviously, eternal damnation is way worse than anything we can experience on earth, right? And so here he says, sin no more. Who else did Jesus say sin no more to? Wasn't the woman at the well, although he could have, because he said, you've had 5 husbands. The one you're with now isn't your husband. So she was at least an adulteress, if not, if not into fornication at the time. He didn't tell her that. He did say that. Who did he say it to? The woman caught in adultery. The woman who had been caught, possibly trapped, she still sinned, drugged before Jesus and said, look, we caught her. The law says she should be stoned. What do you say? Right? And he does the whole thing where he writes on the ground and they all walk away. And he asks the woman, he says, where are your accusers? Has anyone condemned you? He said, no, Lord. Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. This is what he says. Was her sin obvious? Yes, it was obvious. He said, go and sin no more. So it's an interesting point here. Did Jesus know this guy had a sin problem? Yeah, or he wouldn't have said, go and sin no more, right? We don't know what his sin problem was, but don't we all have it? Don't we all have it? You know, if you say no to that, you got a lying problem. That's a sin too. So you got to deal with that. But here, he cares about the man. See, you've been made well. What was this guy doing in the temple? Had he been able to come to the temple? Probably not. He'd been invalid. He'd been sick. He's in the temple. And Jesus says, you've been made well. But a worse thing, you don't want a worse thing to come upon you. I have seen some people talk about how sin has, that God, you know, effectively, I mean, the language they would use sometimes is God curses somebody because of some sin they've done in their life, and they have sickness and, you know, terrible things happen to them, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think this is what Jesus is saying. I think he's talking spiritually here. Can we have, do we have effects, long-term effects of sinful behavior. Absolutely. Spiritual effects, obviously, could be eternal effects, physical effects of sinful behavior, right? Sure, absolutely. Does God go around and say, like, zap, 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 zap because of your sin? I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Because who would be left? Who would be left? And God is not a respecter of persons. And I'm really thankful for that. He's not a respecter of persons. So, the man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus who made him well. Going on in verse 16. For this reason, the Jews persecuted Jesus and sought to kill him, because he had done these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, my Father has been working to now, and I have been working. Now, you start this verse and you think, like, for this reason the Jews persecuted Jesus and sought to kill him. You say, okay, so some period longer after this, a few days or weeks or whatever, the word had gotten around that Jesus had done this. The rumor that he'd broken the Sabbath had caught up to the Pharisees or whatever, and they were now on his case. Look what it says. But Jesus answered them. This is happening right there in the event. Some Pharisee, very likely, I say Pharisee, could have been a Sadducee, could have just been some Jew, who really wants to try to follow the Sabbath, comes up and says, what it said, they persecuted him and sought to kill him. How do you know somebody seeks to kill you? Yeah, they're threatening you. You remember the situations where Jesus was, where it said they took up stones to stone him? Look, somebody's trying to kill you. When they're picking up big rocks and they're saying, everybody grab a rock, we have to stone him, we're going to kill him. This is like, if you were here, maybe in Texas or where else, and something like this happened, everybody's pulling out their guns, right? I mean, that someone's after your life. They're reacting this way. But then Jesus answered them, my Father has been, you violated the Sabbath. My Father has been working until now, and I have been working. That I'm doing the work of God. Now, he's going to teach them in other places, right, that this is, the Sabbath was meant for man, not man for the Sabbath. He tries to teach them the spirit, again, the spiritual versus physical, right? But it says after this, therefore the Jews sought all the more to kill him, not only because he broke the Sabbath, but also he said that God was his Father, making himself equal to God. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. There, there is definitely some of that. I'll repeat a little of that. Um, Alvin said that, the Pharisees were worried about losing their place, and losing their power, and losing their position, and losing their religion and whatever, because Jesus was obviously teaching them some different angles on this stuff. Uh, yeah, that wasn't just a practical consideration. When something starts changing in the world around you and starts maybe threatening your livelihood or something, it's pretty unusual for someone to say, man, I got to go kill those people. This is vicious. This is vicious. He said they tried even more. They'd already been trying to kill him, and now they're trying even more. Can you imagine the discussion going on? You get this in places. There's one place where the people, when he comes to, I think it was in the place we had last time, but I get them all mixed up. He comes there and they said, well, is Jesus going to come to the feast? And some said, he's a good man. And some said, no, he deceives the people. There was buzz all over the place. We talked about how fast news travels in the marketplace. Can you imagine all the discussion of all these people? This guy broke the Sabbath. He can't be from God. He's violating the law of Moses. That's just proof positive. Can't you see? You could see that, right? You could see someone saying that. Someone said, but he healed the guy. How can that be? How can that be wrong? What he did. So there was a lot of ferment. There was a lot of action going on here. Um, Jesus says, and he goes on into a longer discourse, and we're gonna go to that next time. But I want to just finish verse 19. Then Jesus answered and said to them. In other words, he's still in this vicinity. He's still hearing what they're saying. He's answering them in this account. Most assuredly, I say to you, the Son can do nothing of himself but what he sees the Father do. For whatever he does, the Son of Man also does in like manner. He said, I'm just doing what I'm being like God. Does God not, I'm gonna expand on the thought a little bit here. Does God turn off the sun on the Sabbath? No. The sun still comes up every day. Well, man, I imagine God's breaking his own Sabbath. He's raising, you see the ridiculousness of some of this? This is where they were at. And Jesus is saying, I'm doing God's work here. And see, they were so focused on the jots and the tittles of the law and the grains of their spices to count out that they lost the meaning. This is what Jesus teaches them in the Gospel of John, all through the Gospel of John. You heard this said, but I say. Jesus never said, "Oh, by the way, that's okay. Don't worry about what was said." No, he was the absolute observant, obedient Jew his whole life. But what does he say? You say this? Yeah, sure. Let me take you to the spiritual realm and tell you what it means spiritually. They don't commit adultery. I tell you, you know what? Don't even look at a woman to lust after. You've already committed adultery. That's what's going on here. And it's going to continue throughout the Gospel of John. It's one of the great themes of John. Any other questions before we close? All right. We will come back in a minute.